You have to have a system that captures this consent, that implements consent, that implements privacy protection, and you have to spend the time to develop that system, train people on how to implement, how to execute the system, where it's just done.
Welcome to the Hope Podcast. It is great to be with you today. I have invited a fantastic guest to join me. He's actually our own in-house counsel and attorney, Greg Webb. Greg, thanks for joining me at the Hope Podcast today.
My pleasure.
It's really exciting to be able to have an opportunity to sit down and talk. We're getting ready for our summer leadership program, which is a great opportunity for us to talk about leadership and what it means to aspire to be better as individuals, as patients, but also as people living with a bleeding disorder that have an ability to sort of take some of the things we've learned and help others. And so, you know, I've found that there's all kinds of people in my life dealing with all kinds of hardships and maybe illness and sickness and other chronic illnesses and stuff that sometimes my experience with living with hemophilia actually has helped them. And so I'm able to lend my experience to them. And so one of the big topics that I was excited to be able to cover with you today is HIPAA, and specifically the privacy of information, patient information, understanding things like PHI and some of the difficulties that we run into. I think we've all heard the name HIPAA, right? And so, but we don't always know what that means, and sometimes we experience hurdles. We're not sure why we experience hurdles, but with that, I just wanted to, talk a little bit about that conversation. And before we get started too far, this might be people's first time getting to know you, so I'll give you a chance to be able to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you're from, how you're connected with Hope, and what you're passionate about.
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan, for having me. Again, like Jonathan said, my name is Greg Webb. I am in-house counsel and also the HIPAA compliance officer for Hope Charities. I've been working with the organization since around 2012 or so. In the beginning at an advisory level as a board member, and then as the organization began to grow and the legal needs began to grow, I transitioned away from being a board member to being strictly an advisor because I wanted to have a little bit of separation there. And then as the organization continued to grow, it went from a more formal in-house counsel role as time went on. And that new information opens your eyes to things that you want to change and things you want to improve upon. And so this was something where obviously as an early charity, you're just doing a lot of good things. But then as you become aware of, the kind of as you're doing more things as an organization and getting involved with helping out with a greater level of need, and you start getting more information, you start to realize, wait a minute, how are we going to handle that in a way that's ethical, that's legal, and beyond just being ethical and legal, but just in a way that's honoring and respectful to patients. And so it's not just about the law, it's not just about ethics, it's about value. And really, as an organization, as we've discussed this, that's really been the core mission for Hope has been to value, respect, and truly honor patients and honor the trust they place within us. Because yes, they come to us with a need, but a lot of times someone, there's this idea that there's a position of power, like you're coming to us and but we don't treat it like that. It's like, no, it's an honor to serve you. It's an honor for you to invite us into your world and for us to be able to help you. And so, but there has to be an exchange. For us to help you, there's things we got to know about you, and there's things we have to learn about you, and we have to get to know you, get to know your need, get to know your situation. As an organization, we have guidelines and things so that we're accountable to our sponsors and our donors. And so you have to make sure we qualify for the program. But beyond qualifying for the program, we have to navigate helping you and learn about you. So that's a pretty long-winded way to say that we get personal information about you when you are a patient or an applicant or a partner of Hope Charities. So
something that I think is really important for people to understand too is that I think a lot of people know us as sometimes they made us as maybe coming to an event like we have our summer leadership program, but they don't realize that we actually have, we call it our day job, where we're actually helping people every single day, that people apply for assistance in a multitude of different ways. We have 8 programs that actually help to distribute funds in some form or fashion. And we've really spent a lot of time and energy at putting those programs together in a way that makes sense for everybody involved. But there's a lot lot of detail. I was just on the phone with somebody the other day, that one of our advisors, actually on our advisory council, he's kind of new to the advisory council, and he was saying, man, I had no idea how much goes into what you guys do day in and day out and what happens in the inner workings of the organization. And I think it's true, is that sometimes people are just going, hey, I have a need. I really need help. And they have no idea of what we're kind of held to, both from a legal and regulatory point of view, also from a responsibility and fiscal responsibility point of view. There's such a plethora of things. It's not as simple as just like, we have this bucket of money, we're going to try to just give people help where we can, although that's the heart of it. But we definitely do take into consideration that we really, truly want people to be respected and to be able to ask for help with a level of dignity. And we want to make certain that we take everyone's personal information with a great deal of respect, consideration, and privacy in mind, which is really why things like HIPAA really, not just the spirit of it in the sense of trying to follow it by the letter of the law, but also the spirit of us and our organization is we're really trying to make certain that we value people even at the level of making sure that nobody that, you always say it this way. You always say if they don't need to know, then they shouldn't be in the details. And so that's super important. And so maybe we could start from just a little higher level. I think it's good to know what the definition of HIPAA is. You've kind of helped me to understand this a little bit better, but tell us a little bit more about what does HIPAA even mean? Is it short for hippopotamus or?
Exactly. It stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act.
Okay.
And what's important to us is the statute itself has to do with the privacy issue of data, the privacy issue of when you're transferring data, you're talking, this is people's lives. You're talking about names, addresses, social security numbers, diagnoses, treatment plans. And obviously that kind of information, of course, is one of the most private things, the attorney-client and the doctor-patient relationship are two of the most protected relationships that I'm aware of, in the law. So that's something that's treated very carefully. And so when the statute was drafted to help transfer insurance coverage, we had to deal with the data that goes with it. And how does this apply to us as a charity, Hope Charities, and what we do? So the first thing I found out very early on, of course, is to fall under the HIPAA regulations, you have to be what's called a covered entity. And a covered entity is a health plan, a healthcare clearinghouse, or a healthcare provider like a doctor or a hospital, something along those lines. So early on, I spoke to you about this. We're not a covered entity. So if we're concerned about having to comply with the privacy rule, technically speaking, we don't, legally speaking, have to. But from the very get-go, there was never a long conversation about would we strive to follow it. It was just a question as to how we would follow it. So early on, we made a commitment. Okay, we don't have to, but we're going to. And so even though we're not, in terms of having to report to Department of Health and Hospitals or OCR, which is the Office of Civil Rights, which is under HHS, we're not making reports to them or whatnot. We're not trying to go to that level of detail because we're not a covered entity. It wouldn't be appropriate. But when it comes to just adopting the guidelines of HIPAA as our personal guidelines, that's something that we have always, or for the past 6-7 years, have we have attempted to do. I promise you, I did pass the bar.
Stroven.
I'm not used to doing this.
Stroven. It's a long day. It's all right, really. It's okay.
The courtroom is different than this. I'm used to being in court.
It's a really good point because I do think that, especially in our context and our culture, we're working with a lot of other nonprofits, right? Some of which are, there is a vast array of the way that in which nonprofits within the medical community actually treat this level of diagnosis information and personal privacy information. I think you have some organizations out there that handle it very lightly, as if there is no, they acknowledge that they're not a covered entity, so they kind of use a lot of risk in terms of just haphazardly not knowing that they're disclosing PHI. Even it's very innocent, I think, sometimes, but they don't take it with a whole level of seriousness. And then there's other organizations out there that take it with a high level of seriousness. And so it's kind of like, and then of course, I know for myself as a patient, I'm going to the doctor and they're kind of like, well, you have to sign this or do that or something. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm signing. Like, it's just, I wish I did, but it's like, I kind of go through it. Like, even go to the doctor now, you've been to these where it's like, you go in and it's like, they're like, oh, you're going to have to, this is for your HIPAA policy. And literally there's a screen sitting in front of you that's like about the size of a thing of bubble gum wrapper, sitting in front of you, and they're like, "This is for your HIPAA policy. Sign there and now." And you're like, "Okay." And they're like, "You don't even see the document, so you don't really even know what you're signing away." Now, I know technically they're supposed to give it to you later and email it to you or provide it to you in some form or fashion, but who's reading that stuff after the moment of your signing? Probably not. But I think the kicker here is that you see a broad array of the way that people treat this diagnosis information and patient privacy information. And so I think what's important here is like, if for me as a patient, like, how should I be aware of how I'm providing my information, when I'm providing my information, what rights do I have?
Yeah, let me preface that. You use the term like PHI, which is the term for protected health information. And so as an organization, like I said, we're not covered, but we're going to respond accordingly. So whenever we get information from a patient, to qualify for our program, you have to have a rare chronic illness. So we're going to learn that. We're going to learn your diagnosis right off the bat. Obviously, We're going to learn your name. We're going to reach out to you and help you. We got to know how to reach you. So we're going to get your phone number. We're going to get your email address, maybe even your fax number. We're going to know your state of residence.
Right.
So there's these fundamental things that we're going to get, which under the HIPAA rule is what's called protective health information. When you put together a diagnosis and any kind of identifying information, you have the magic formula, protected information. And so the question that we ask ourselves is, okay, so how are we going to safeguard this information? Now, there are certain rules that HIPAA lays out. There are physical safeguards. So when we get that information, you're going to fill an application. Now, and I'll get into this in a second, how they're starting to make adjustments in federal law about electronic data, because obviously that's only growing. Everything's becoming more and more electronic. But we did start out as a primarily paper-based organization, although we're moving away from that. But let's just start with the paper-based. So if you're going to fax or email or even mail in some sort of physical paperwork, or you take an electronic data and turn it to paper by printing it, all of a sudden you have this physical data. So with the physical data, you got to safeguard it. So you got to have a designated place for that information, which in our organization, we have a set room with a set filing cabinet. The cabinet's locked. The room is locked. So you have to create these inherent barriers where you're limiting access to this data. And then with electronic data, it's a little more complicated. But again, you're talking about, whether it be passcodes, encryption, things you're doing to block data. Now, how far you want to go with that depends upon the organization. I mean, if you talk to, a large insurance company or a large hospital, they're going to have either internally or outside IT companies that are on a monthly basis, checking for potential exposure breaches or areas of weakness. And, like on your phone, how every few days or month you get updates.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that larger organizations are going to implement. Smaller organizations, particularly ones that aren't technically covered by HIPAA, may not go so far as to have, this monthly IT review, but you can still do fundamental basic things like passcodes on your computer. I'm not going to recommend any kind of particular cloud software, but if you keep information in the cloud, do your due diligence and research about the encryption and the protection that company implements. And again, I'm not going to say a company, but some are better than others. And again, it's about due diligence. You want to do your research and pick a good company. If you use some kind of case management software or client management software, do your research there about how well is that protected. And then internally, okay, what employees or volunteers have access to information, whether it be physical or electronic, and make sure you're tracking that and make sure you know how they have access to it and how to eliminate that access as appropriate if they cease to be a volunteer. And also controlling the degree of access. So it may not be all or nothing. One person may need to know, a name but not a diagnosis. Another person or organization might need to know everything. And that's okay as long as, again, there's good rules in place. And then once you put, and really it would take hours and hours to go over every single detail. So I'm really going to just cover the surface. So forgive me if I don't go into a lot of the details. It would just be a lot and probably boring for most people. But once you put your policies in place, training is essential, because if the people don't know what's being done, they're not going to be able to follow the rules effectively. So you got to have good training. And again, and that should be annual. You need to regularly even if it's because first of all, you got to train annually. You have to review your policies annual and you should be looking to make tweaks, make improvement, checking the law, check if there's any changes. And so you want to be aware of that issue. And then you also have to think about not just your staff. You got to think of your volunteers, and then you got to think of the people that you do business with, like your vendors. So for example, if you have an outside janitorial services, that's why it's good to have these physical safeguards about, okay, you're allowed to go in that room and clean. You may say, you know what, the janitor's not going to go into that room. Or you may just keep your filing cabinets locked and all your computers are shut down and locked, and trust the janitors to even go into the room. But you may take a hardline approach of like, not only is the cabinet locked, the door's locked, we'll clean that room ourselves. I'll leave that up. I'm not saying there's a hard, fast rule on that, but you have to be aware of limiting exposures. But then there's individuals who you do contracts with, not a janitorial service, but say you're a CPA or you're a lawyer, or you might even use consulting services about marketing and things of that nature. And they're going to have exposure to information that is where they deliberately or intentionally have access to your private information, or the private information that's in your possession or custody. Well, then you want to have what's called a business associate agreement. So that business associate or BA needs to know what your rules are, and you have a contract with them and say, hey, listen, this is what you can and can't do. If anything goes wrong, you have to let us know within X amount of days. And that goes into breaches. So, you have your rules internally. You've trained your volunteers. You trained your staff. You got your business associates trained. You got your business associates with contracts. So now what are you doing with the outside world with your patients? Okay, so first of all, if you've never implemented a HIPAA rule or HIPAA policies in your organization, as soon as you implement it, per the regulations, you're supposed to send it out to all of your patients or anyone who if you have their information, you got to mail it out to them. And then you have to do that annually and every time there's a material change. Well, the other time that you have to notify your patients about issues is if there's a breach. Now, obviously, you hope it never happens, but it could happen. And if it happens, it's not time to press the panic button. It's just a time to, okay, we found out, we got to notify the relevant patients need to be notified as soon as possible. And so we're going to mail out notice of the breach, and we're going to mail out notice of what we're doing to fix it. Now, if that breach occurs with your business associate, you got to know that associate is going to communicate with you, because per the statute, you're supposed to do it as soon as reasonably possible at the latest of 60 days. Now, a lot of organizations, they'll use that 60 days as sort of the default. That's not technically legal and certainly not a good idea, because that 60 days is that outer limit. You're always supposed to do it as soon as possible. So, you're not supposed to just wait till the 59th day, but you got to make sure that your business associates and your volunteers and everyone understands, you got to let us know as soon as possible, because before we contact our patients, we're going to develop a mitigation plan first, because that's something we have to notify them of. So we need time to know what the breach is, first of all, what it is and who's affected, how are we going to stop it, how we're going to mitigate it, and then send out notice. And that all has to be done as soon as possible, but the latest of 60 days. Well, what if you're a business associate that lets the cookie out of the milk spilt? Let's just say that happens, and they tell you on day 58 or day 57 or day 59, you're in a real bind. So you got to make sure that the people you work with, whether it be volunteers, staff, or business associates, understand, hey, you got to let us know promptly. It's not time to hide the ball, own up to it. It may not even be your fault. It could be, it could be anything from, let's just say there's a burglary, right? You're broken into. Now, maybe there wasn't even a breach. Like someone could break into your house or break into your office and take a laptop that has no information on it or no access to information, and they don't go anywhere else. There was no breach. There
Right.
was. It's obviously concerning, but not a breach. If they go in and take client files, well, all of a sudden you have a breach. You got to deal with it. Same thing electronically. You might have a staff member that clicks on some kind of spam email by mistake and there's a breach there electronically. And so now that's when you probably, if you don't have an IT department, you might need to invest I'm not saying hire an IT full-fledged IT department, but get a contractor, someone to kind of help and professionally, okay, how do we, unless you're an expert already, but
Right.
if you don't have the expertise, go outside, spend the money to go outside your organization and bring in the expertise to do damage control and develop what's called a mitigation plan that you can send to your patients. And so that's, I think really important.
So I want to take a step back here because I listen to all of this stuff, and of course we've had a million conversations about these things. So I feel like I finally have my head wrapped around some of these things, and we put a tremendous amount of policies in place and processes and all of these things that we try to do internally to make sure that we're I mean, I know some clinical settings that don't probably take it quite as extreme as we do, even, which is kind of surprising sometimes. But I do. I mean, we take it very, very seriously, and we go very, very strict with our approach to this. But and a lot of that's because you've helped to inform us, but also help as our compliance officer. Technically, you've helped us to make certain that our training is up to date. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but we do a HIPAA training that we do in the beginning of the year, every year, for all of our employees, whether they're patient-facing or not, because we have some employees that are just doing administrative things, or maybe they're handling events or things like that. They're not necessarily handling patient applications per se, so they might not see PHI, but we want them to be aware and informed so that if they encounter it, they know how to handle it with a great deal of consideration.
Absolutely.
But I hear all of this stuff, and it starts as a patient, okay? I start to hear all of these things, and it makes me like, oh my gosh, like I should never go anywhere, and I should never give anybody my name or number, or, like I start to panic a little bit about, like, I start thinking about all the, one time I shopped at Target and I swiped my card, and the next day everybody has my password, I don't, so I don't know where the balance is in this, but I'm just thinking about the person who may be hearing this for the first time and thinking, oh my gosh, I should hide under a rock and never go to the doctor again. And next time they ask me to sign it, I should have my attorney review it before I sign it, Right. And so I'm just curious from your point of view, what would you say to somebody that's like really afraid of like, saying the wrong thing or giving their information, or maybe they already have given their information to an organization that maybe isn't trusted or maybe doesn't have a high consideration with this. I mean, we work in an environment where there's lots of nonprofits out there. A lot of people are trying to help. And so, but maybe there's some place you go, oh my gosh, like I gave my information to my local thrift store because they said they would pay my light bill. But I don't even realize, like, I know for sure they don't take a high level. What do you do if you feel like you've done that, and should you hide under a rock, or is it something that you should just be careful? Like what degree of caution should you have as an individual, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's a good question, and kind of a hard question as a lawyer to answer.
That's my job, Greg, is to try to trip you. I'm trying to see what can we do to.
Because our job is to instill our job is to instill a bit of fear in all of our clients. That's really our job, is to
just be
make
honest.
sure you're a little
just
bit afraid.
Say it
you
like
need to be
it
a little
is.
bit afraid,
True story. Actually, true story. Yes, it is your job.
Yeah. See, Jonathan's going along.
Happy-go-lucky.
He's doing his thing. I'm doing good. I'm raising money. I'm giving away money, and I'm like, no, wait, but you need to be afraid of this and afraid of that, and you better watch out for that. And that's my job. And he's going along thinking,
we're just helping
really?
people.
I mean,
I'm just here to help people. What are we doing? I just want to give money away. That's all I'm here to do.
So
Greg's
think,
got to be Debbie Downer.
right? That's our job. It's a tough job, but someone has to do it, right?
It's okay, though. I mean,
I tell you how many times, like, I walk, like, a case is over. Well, I walk out of court or whatever, and like a client is like, "Man, thank you so much, Greg. Blah 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 blah. By the way, I hope I never have to talk to you ever again." And I tell them, it's like, I'm so glad I could help you, but the worst part of my job is no one ever wants to ever see me again. It's like, Except Jonathan, because he's stuck
Well,
with me because it's an ongoing thing, so he never
yeah,
gets
yeah,
rid of
yeah.
it.
Well, we love you, and we'll keep you around. But
But the answer to that question is no, you should not hire a rock. You should just be smart and aware. And for example, look at for example, I don't donate to every charity out there. I mean, if I've never heard of the charity, I'm not going to donate to it until I've researched that charity and see what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it. You can never be, and the thing about due diligence is it's never perfect diligence. You can only do the best you can do to a certain extent and hope for the best at a certain level. But look at that organization. According to the HIPAA rules, on your website, you have to publish who the compliance officer is, where to call about complaints or questions. You have to be able to ask for their privacy policy at any time, and they got to give it to you. If they don't have those fundamental things in place, well, that can be a yellow or red flag, depending upon how you want to approach it. Now, maybe you know enough about the organization where you're willing to gloss over some of the, particularly, like for example, if you're not a covered entity, you don't have to do that. So does that mean that they're a bogus organization or they're a fraud or a scam? Absolutely not.
right.
But if you already have concerns, then I think those missing pieces might maybe it's not the final, okay, I'm closing the door to you, but I'm going to keep researching before I trust you and accept you. Right. And let's say you already have a good feeling about an organization, and all of a sudden you see those above and beyond type efforts for a non-covered. Now, if it's a covered entity, it's a deal breaker. It's like if you're a covered entity, you're not doing these things, that's a fundamental problem.
Right.
If you're a hospital or whatever, your insurance company. But for a non-covered entity, this is truly above and beyond. I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I'm not saying you shouldn't, as a patient, have those high standards, but do realize it is technically speaking going above and beyond. But if you have a good family organization, you can see where they are already going above and beyond, and they can answer these questions about HIPAA and about your data and about what you're doing, and can provide a privacy policy. Then I don't think that should be the end all be all, but it should be certainly another thing to look at. And okay, you know what? That's an organization that is,
They're trying.
if they're excellent in this area, then certainly there's reason to trust them with my information because they're trying. And the biggest thing, because no organization can guarantee there's no breach. No organization can guarantee there's not a problem. Target can't guarantee that a scammer doesn't come in. But what they can do is take every effort to protect you, and if there's a problem, notify you and work to protect you. So I think it's just about doing your due diligence as a patient.
That's really good.
And not living in fear, but just be smart.
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's important because I do think inadvertently, I'll give you an example. Like I've gone to a lot of events before, but you think about, especially in the hemophilia community, we see this very commonly. They'll say like, "Oh, what type of hemophilia do you have? Hemophilia A, hemophilia B, von Willebrand's disease, whatever." It's a common question on a lot of registrations of just an event. Well, technically, if you've given them your name, your address, your phone number, and now your diagnosis, you've actually disclosed PHI. Right. And so, I think it's important. Like now for us, we take that extraordinarily seriously. We still ask those questions so that we know what the best information is to be able to give the people who are attending our events are. And we think that that's fair to do. Now, we also take that with a high level of seriousness, but I'm not sure that every organization I've ever attended for every event, or maybe you've seen a survey or something that came across like online and somebody said, "Hey, take this survey." I've done some surveys before. I didn't know exactly who the company or the people were that I was giving that information to. And I'm just thinking, well, they're just asking me for my ideas. They just want my feedback so that they can make better services. But inadvertently, I've still told them at the very basic, they still want to know, well, do you have hemophilia A? Well, yeah. I have. Do you have hemophilia B? Well, yeah. Well, do you have hemophilia? Do you have von Willebrand? Yeah. Well, inadvertently, I've given them PHI. And so now what started as sort of a simple process, I realized, oh my gosh, like I've just disclosed a certain level of, and so I think to your point is it's probably as a more educated patient now, I know that I should be a little bit more aware of who I'm disclosing my PHI to, who I'm disclosing my information to, and whether or not they're trustworthy and somebody that I need to be able to disclose to as well.
Yeah, I think that goes back to something you asked me earlier, which is just because you have a need or you're going through a time of crisis and you need help, it doesn't mean that, that you should be treated with any less dignity and respect.
Right.
And so if you're coming to us, yes, I mean, we have to confirm that you have a diagnosis to qualify for our program. So, of course. But what we do, though, is we let you know up front, hey, in the application, do you consent to give us? It's almost like a lot of orders just ask for it, just it's understood. You got to tell us this. Well, I think one thing that we do is we tell you up front, hey, listen, just so you know, there's like a roadmap. You're giving us private information. Be aware of that. And we're being upfront about it. We are asking you private information.
Right.
We're asking you for consent before you do it.
Right.
So that way, if you have any because have you ever been in a situation where you're kind of going along and then halfway through you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what am I doing? Right? That moment, and like the light bulb goes on, but maybe you're halfway down the road and it's hard to backtrack.
That happens to me every time I buy a car.
Right. What's that interest rate again?
Oh my gosh, what am I doing?
So what we try to do is we're not hiding the ball here. We're going right up front. Okay, you're giving us private information. We value that. We respect it. But we want you to understand that you're giving it to us with your consent. And we may have to, it's going to be, people in an organization are going to are going to find out about it because they're going to try to help you. So they got to know, hey, we're paying rent to this location. That's where you live. We're going to be mailing you, we know who your landlord is, or we know who your light bill is. We know your account number. If we're going to be helping out with those kind of things, we're going to be paying them directly. So we're all upfront about that and asking for consent before you do it. And if you don't want to give consent, that's perfectly fine. And also at the end of it, if you have any questions about what we're doing with the information, that's what I'm here for. Call and ask. Say, listen, who is giving it? Why are you giving it? And you can withdraw your consent anytime if you don't like the answer.
That's right.
And we'll respect that. We will close your file. We will destroy our information.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to take from you, but to give to you, we got to know some things about you. So we see it as a reciprocal relationship. You're getting this information because we want to help you, and we honor that, but you need to trust us too. But if you don't trust us, that's okay.
It makes it so much better when someone registers for an event and they know that they're disclosing PHI, to know that we actually take care of that information. We have the systems and processes and everything and the training for our staff in place, that we take that information just as highly as we do when you're applying for financial assistance. There's some regulatory things that we're trying to abide by here, but we're also going above and beyond to act as a covered entity. I mean, that's things that is really just, it's kind of like, we're really, it's the belt and suspenders approach. It's like we're not just using one safety net, we're using two or three.
Right.
But even when people come into the advocacy aspect of it, and I see a lot of organizations out there that may be doing, and maybe because they're maybe grassroots or they're small or whatever, maybe they're growing, whatever. But I've even been to some larger events where it's like you're disclosing PHI, but they don't have the mechanisms and training and the staff and all of the background to make certain that they're taking that to such a high level that their information is really being, they have the peace of mind to know that their information is being really safeguarded. And I appreciate that about what we do. I think that that's and it's really a testament to your leadership in that, because you have continually said that over and over and over again since, like you said, 7-8 years ago when you first really got involved as a leader, part of the leadership team, that you said, you know what, we want to do this not just at what's minimally required of us. We want to do this at a higher standard than that. And I feel like we've done that. We've done that well, but that's really a testament to your leadership in providing that guidance.
With our rules, there's certain safeguards we put in place. For example, don't think that just because you have an application, the entire world sees your application. We don't publish your application on the World Wide Web. It's not on our website.
Right.
And it's not on our bulletin board
It's
either.
not even disclosed to our own staff.
That's
like
what I'm saying. I'm just saying, 1 to 3 people are likely to see your information.
Right.
And really. Now, there's exception to that where if there's a complicating factor, where all of a sudden those normal people, those 1 to 3 people that see applications may have to go outside of that and okay, there's some challenges here. I need some help here. And so we might expand that, which is why we train everybody. So that way, if you have to go, like I might see one application a year, if that, right?
Yeah.
I don't see applications.
The problem children. You only see the problem children.
Exactly. So I'm actually
You don't even need to go to HIPAA training.
I really don't even need to go. I don't even.
Outside of teaching it, you don't even need to be there, Greg.
but that's fine. But if there's a problem, you bring me in. Well, guess what? I've trained myself,
Right.
and I know what to do.
That's amazing.
And
I want to be like
likewise-
you when I grew up. That's just so great.
Likewise, if we have to bring in someone from our, let's say, like we have what's called advisory council, where we have certain experts in the field. Well, let's say, oh man, this person has a real, and a tax problem. So we're going to bring an expert and get some advice on that. And of course, and if anything is really off the beaten path, we're going to contact that patient.
Sure.
And just say, hey, listen, this is a little above and beyond what we normally do. We're going outside our normal procedures. We're going to get your consent. Right. Another thing, for example, is with our Access to Care program. Obviously we're making payments on your behalf. And, so we make sure that we have your consent. Hey, listen, you're giving us, and we make that very, very clear. So if you are applying for that program, we are specifically getting your consent. Hey, can we contact the insurance company on your behalf? Can we make payments on your behalf? Can we do these things on your behalf? And we get your consent right off the bat. And if you have any, it's not all or nothing. If you don't want to sign it right off the bat because you have questions, don't sign it.
Right.
Call. Ask, let's explain it to you, what we do, why we do it, how we do it, how we protect it.
Absolutely.
And if we can't answer your question, make you comfortable, then go to another organization, please.
Right. Absolutely.
But if we can, but ask the questions. I mean, you're not obligated to answer any of our questions or give us your information. And we want to make that very, very clear. This is purely voluntary.
Yeah.
We're just asking to help you, but what I really don't want anyone to do is just hit X on their computer and just delete the whole thing. If they have any questions, I certainly hope that they would, and that's part of my reason of doing this is if you don't like or you feel uncomfortable, before you X the screen, just give us a call.
Right.
And I'll talk to you personally and answer all your questions about your information and what we do, why we do it, how we do it.
Right.
And the honest truth is we can even tailor a plan within reason to you. Right. If you, hey, I can give you this, but I don't want to give you this. Do you really, really need this? And if we can help you without getting that information, we'll do it.
Right. Because sometimes in some of the programs, like we're not exactly sure what the solution is.
Exactly.
And we probably need 2 or 3 layers, but just for convenience and time's sake, we'll maybe ask all the questions up front so that we can have everything we need to know which approach is the best fit. But you might come in and say, like, this is my real laser focused issue. I need this one thing that I'm trying to solve. And then we're able to move forward with that. But
and another thing we do is, in addition to limiting individuals' access, even if someone has access, we limit what they have access to. So, for example, a lot of times, like with our patient review committee, we're not going to disclose your full name. We might do just the first name and what state you're in, and that's it, just to help with the conversation. But we're trying to limit disclosure of information within the organization. So this is not,
I don't even know if we do states anymore. I think
we have gotten rid of that.
I think it's just name and then like a brief summary. Even
I've always fought for less, but it's been back and forth with that.
But I mean, I do think like even for the review committee meetings that we have, where we have a committee of people that make decisions over specifically our DPA program, which is direct patient assistance. That's where we're helping people with housing or utilities or different types of things that they might need that are what we consider vital needs. In that program specifically, that is decided upon by a group of volunteers, and it's actually not our staff. It's actually a group of people that are trained, that they come every cycle, which right now is currently monthly, but they come and they basically go through the summary of the application. They don't even see the application. They don't see address. They don't see, a lot of times they're just looking at purely like this is a person who qualifies and this is their story and where they're at. And then their responsibility is to kind of look at the needs against each other, because oftentimes we have to make some pretty hard decisions there.
And now in the law, the term, well, it still is technically, it's called the minimum necessary standard. Like, don't, if you're disclosing to a third party, disclose the minimum amount possible, whether it be internally or externally. So if you're a staff person, if you don't need to know their name, you don't have to know their name. If you just need to know, hey, here's the account number, here's, like if someone's paying a check, here's the address for the energy company on behalf of this account number. We're trying to limit the amount of disclosure to every person.
So let me take a step back and ask a little bit broader question that I think is important, because a lot of people who are maybe involved with like maybe their local chapter, or they're and they are maybe a volunteer, or they're a board member even, and they're watching this and they're trying to understand, like, okay, what can we do? We haven't really spent a lot of time working on this so far, but what can we do to support or to do better at this? Or maybe they're listening to this and, like I was maybe the first time 8 years ago, and starting to like realize that, oh my gosh, I was just trying to help people. But if they were a volunteer or a board member or somebody of an organization like that, or maybe an executive director that might be listening to this and wondering like, what should they do next? What would be your best advice for them to move forward, to strengthen something if they don't have anything in place currently?
So you start with educating yourself before you do anything. Just educate yourself a little bit, whether it be talking to your current attorney or getting a referral to a different attorney, or just find, be careful where you go, but with the internet, you can find online seminars and things to educate yourself. Mm-hmm. And so just get a little bit of information first. Just start to absorb some information. And then the next step would be I'd want to talk to other organizational leaders. What are you doing? And kind of get their, particularly ones you trust and respect, and find out kind of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then the next step is to just start the process of, now if you want to pay for it, there are outside organizations that they contract out to kind of help you with your policies and help you with your physical implementation and things of that nature. But if you're not a covered entity, I'm not really sure that you really have to or want to go there. So then you just start working on, a real basic policy. Start small.
Maybe just putting the filing cabinet in a separate office and having a lock on it. That one step alone could be
that one step alone is huge. And unfortunately, in today's age, though, piggybacking to that, that's a great first step. You can't ignore the electronic elements in this day and age, though. So even though that's a great first step and it's a no-brainer, at least get a separate filing cabinet and lock it up. You got to deal with your computer access, your electronic access. If you use the cloud, you got to deal with passcodes. Make sure, like if someone leaves your team, you got to eliminate that access. A lot of people just, I'm not saying a lot, but I'm sure it happens where there's a delay or whatnot. You got to be very diligent, and be very careful as access to if it's through the cloud, who has passcodes, if it's on a specific computer, who has, do a good password, don't have, 1, 2, 3, if your computer's stolen, if your computer's lost, if your computer's broken into, whatever, you want to be able to, if it's connected to the cloud, deconnect it. Right. If it's in that hard drive, you want to make sure that there's good encryption where no one can access it, and that's where the cloud is really the way to go to keep your data on a private server. It sounds safer, but it probably isn't, because with cloud, most of the time you have better encryption. You can limit access much easier because you have to access through a specific email with a specific passcode. You can remotely, someone can, take a briefcase and run with their laptop to Cancun or whatever to do something stupid, cancel access, right? And so what you suggested is absolutely 100% true, but one B has to be the electronic issues in this day and age.
Yeah, that's a good point. I really think that, I know you don't have all the time in the world, and obviously we don't have the ability to help every single person. But I would say, you mentioned earlier about people calling. They can call us as well, and just, and we're happy to share whatever, policies we have. But also, I just think that it's important. Like I know, for instance, in the hemophilia community, NHF has a policy on this, which is really good, that they make recommendations to their chapters. I think that's really powerful. I think HFA has some sort of a policy as well. So very, very good that this is not being, ignored. I think that there's kind of like your CPA, you have degrees of risk that they're trying to, I used to be in financial planning, as you know, and so I was, there was always degrees of risk. It was like, well, how conservative do you want to be? How risky do you want to be?
Absolutely.
And so each organization and each group of people has the ability to choose where they want to land in that. But I think ignoring it is not the right option. And as an organization, but also as good as a patient and a consumer to be aware that this is something that's out there so that you know who you're giving your information to and how it's being managed. I think those are all important things to know. But I just want to say I really sincerely appreciate all that you've done for us, for Hope, to help us to be able to, really build, I believe, what's a strong set of policies, and also to keep us on track, because we audit these things regularly and look at what our policies and processes are. We just went through another big kind of overhaul of our processes and intake. And so this is something that I think that's really, really important. But I think that, I just appreciate your leadership so much to go above and beyond, not just to stick with the bare minimum, but just to be really, considerate and to, because we truly value people. It's not just about, it is about really caring for people even. And that's the level of integrity that I certainly hope that we're able to have thematically through everything that we do. But it's that we're not just saying it in word and speech. It actually, the amount of work, we might say it one time in public, but actually the amount of work and labor and time that we've invested with that process behind the closed doors. And I hope that that's what people have been able to kind of get from this today, is just to see that there's a whole lot that goes into the process of us setting up these programs and these financial assistance aid. We just crossed over, as you know, $2 million that we've distributed to people who were in crisis over the last, really since we started doing this. And as a small nonprofit, that's a huge landmark that we're thrilled to have crossed. I certainly hope that we'll be able to give a lot more away. There's far more need out there today than what even we can do collectively through partnerships with other organizations. We're going to see a lot of good things happen. So I certainly hope that we can continue to do that, but we want to do that carefully. We want to do that with consideration of people's privacy, and we want to do that in a way that is really healthy and whole for everyone involved, not just trying to be quick to try to put a Band-Aid on something and then it gets ripped off because you just didn't take the care and the measurement to do that. So thank you for helping us to be able to accomplish all of that.
And before we close, I know, I don't want to, bore you too much, but speaking to the organization, there's a few things. I mean, what you brought up, I think was a good landing point, because you asked earlier, what should an organization do if they're just getting started? And I think you brought up maybe the fundamental issue that might be either a fear from the outset or an early challenge that they're going to face. And that's that tension between, if you're a covered entity, it's a bit different. But if you're a non-covered entity, you're operating in this space where, you're fundraising, you're working with patients, you're working with sponsors, you're trying to do this mission that, is not just, like with a hospital, they're providing medical care. Everything is just very, very much more narrow. It's a little broader with a charity. There's a mission that is challenging in the standpoint of following all these rules while you're trying to make the mission happen. And there's a tension there. And I know, you and I know you're talking about the risk versus the reward of the mission, of pursuing the mission, and how do you minimize risk while still get the reward of doing the mission? And we've had these debates. As the lawyer, I put on the hat of, I'm going to fight for decreasing risk at all points. But I also recognize the mission, and sometimes you have to find a middle ground. And so all I can tell an organization that's challenging with that is, my philosophy is, okay, let's just start with the non-negotiables. What are the fundamentals that we absolutely, first of all, really have to do? And there's no way there can be any real serious impediment to the mission by implementing. So I call it the non-negotiables, maybe just call it low-hanging fruit, those things you can do, like no-brainers. Start with that. So get your feet wet with the non-negotiables. We're definitely going to do 1, 2, and 3. And then as you start to move along and you start to be, okay, are we going to implement this policy? Well, if we implement this policy, it might be hard to do this. Okay, take the time and just talk through it and get a team together. And that may be where some feedback where, it's rarely all or nothing. I feel like this is the one area where the past several years we've really grown a lot, which is a few years ago we implemented all the non-negotiables. And then over the past several years, as we've expanded our mission, expand things we've done, we've had this tension of, okay, how are we going to, if we're going to invite people to our event and they're a sponsor and they're going to, meet with, how are we going to limit what information they can get, but yet still invite them and still let them be a part in our sponsor a meeting, and I think we've just talked that through and we've navigated it through, and we find, I won't call it middle ground, but middle ground, find areas where, okay, we're going to limit exposure here, but we're going to allow little windows here, but the patient is always going to know what we're doing and why we're doing it.
That's good.
And so I just think for an organization, it's just recognizing that, yes, there will be tension. So start with the basics, and then, and I really embrace it. I embrace the tension. That's what it takes to grow. And especially, and even as a team, I feel like the team gets stronger, because the biggest mistakes happen, in my opinion, when you're just going along thoughtlessly. If you're just doing whatever without even thinking about it, you're gonna stumble. It's like if your drive with the headlights aren't on, you're gonna hit something eventually. But if as a team, if you're discussing, talking, thinking, considering, the chance of you doing it right increase exponentially. Even if the decision isn't perfect, the process of dealing with the different feedbacks, from the CFO who's dealing with fundraising versus the CEO who's dealing with the mission versus the lawyer who's telling everybody to stop doing everything because it's dangerous. Just working through those things and not just saying, okay, forget it, whatever, but just being committed to the process, being committed to dialogue amongst your team, being open to outside counsel and getting feedback, just constantly engage in that process and discuss it. Okay, we're going to start this new program. What are the pitfalls? We just had this patient with this brand new issue. What are the pitfalls? That constant dialogue, that striving to implement the policies effectively, and by law, you're expected to change them. You're expected to update them. Well, guess what? If the law expects you to update them annually, if you're expected to update them, well, maybe change is understood is going to happen, and you're just getting better every day, every year as you grow. You get better and better. That's what we strive to do. I encourage everyone just to start the process and just be committed to getting better. And you're never perfect. You're just constantly progressing.
Yeah, and you've helped me in two ways. You've helped me in a million ways, but two important things is that you've been really important for helping me understand what the guardrails are that we should be up, that should be there and be firm. But also you've helped, you've also helped to encourage us to continue in the pursuit of the mission. And I think sometimes people are afraid. I mean, I know with any, I think about, this a lot with CPAs too, is that, sometimes you can be so afraid of facing something that you don't face it. We're getting ready for this leadership talk, here and time to be able to spend time together. And I think about this among leadership. Sometimes just facing your fear is exactly what you need to do most. That's where you're going to have the most progress.
Yes.
And so what I hear you saying in this is that if you don't know, just kind of put yourself in the problem a little bit. Don't be afraid of it. Just kind of listen, ask for some help from around you, start to investigate. And then as you learn, do something about it. Don't just ignore it and sweep it under the rug and hope it goes away and just say, well, I don't know about that. I'm not a professional in that field.
Right.
No, if you're aware of that there's a problem, it is your responsibility as an adult and as a leader in an organization or as an individual to be able to address it. But it's also legally responsible to do that too, not just morally. And so I think that there's some things that I think that you can't possibly know everything. One of the things that I so appreciate and never in a million years thought, I mean, many people who know the Hope story, that we started this organization from a very grassroots effort. It was a very, very simple thing where, my wife and I were just helping people out of the back of our car kind of thing. It was like very, 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 we heard somebody was in need. We were like, okay, great. Quick, pay their light bill, Right. It was just, we did a fundraiser. We had some money. We just started helping people. It was very simple.
Right.
I never in a million, you and I went to school together, went to college together, and I never in a million years thought I would need to be in such close proximity and relationship with legal help in the way that we have, and thank God for our friendship in it. But also I just think, you're right here in the office. Like, how many conversations do we have in the hallway, just in the middle of things happening, that really, really go a long way? And so that brings a lot of safety and security, I think, both to the patient who might be applying for assistance. It brings a lot of safety and security for us, those of us who are working in a highly regulated environment. But it also, what I appreciate about that is that you in of yourself have also balanced out the heart and passion and the drive to keep the spirit of what we do whole, in making it purely that we still just are here to just help people. We still really work hard to salvage, and because you can get so fearful and so overwhelmed by the burden of the responsibility of all the things that could go wrong, that sometimes it can literally squeeze out the life of what you do. And by having you in the mix and having your advice in the mix and helping, do this together, I'm able to rely on you significantly. We as a team are able to rely on you to help take care of the bad stuff, but really make certain that we could just stay focused, and the people who are on the front lines of helping people every day are not burdened by that in a way that is crushing to us.
I deliberately bring this up in every HIPAA training because I really see it as a core thing, which is, there's rules and there's technicalities, but if you embrace, there is a spirit behind the rule. And a lot of times, you start reading the Code of Federal Regulations, and the average, lawyer's one thing, but the average person, they're gonna close that book really fast, right? I mean, whenever a law is passed because there's a human need, right? And the spirit behind the rule does matter. And I think that if you embrace that as an organization, I think it changes things. Like, the one thing that I see, and I sincerely mean this, like when I see our team, consider these issues of privacy and confidentiality, to me, it bolsters this idea of respect and dignity and value to the people we serve.
Yeah.
It's not a technicality. It's not just a going through the motions. It almost not almost, but I think it does. I think by keeping that at the forefront, it reminds us all of, how important these people are. It's not just numbers on a page. It's like, no, that's that person's confidential information. It's easy when you do something.
Person's life at risk.
When you do something day in, day out, it's easy to get a little bit lackadaisical. It's easy to take it for granted. I think it's human nature.
Yeah.
And I think what this does, and there's more, and hopefully your organization has many ways to doing this. And I'm not saying this is the only way, but I'm biased. So this to me isn't. But I've seen the more our organization has embraced not just the rules of HIPAA, but the spirit and heart behind it, which is to protect people's privacy and to value them. I see it come up. It's like, oh yeah, okay. It's like, it almost like it breaks you out of that, person with a need or a person. It's like, no,
right.
It keeps you on your toes, but not just from a standpoint of legal and ethical protection, but even from a standpoint of respect and honor and inherent value. Because anyone that works in a charity, I mean, hopefully the underlying desire is you want to help people, you value people, you want to serve people. That's got to be your motive, right?
Right.
And if that's your motive, it's one thing to have that motive, but that motive can be forgotten in the day in and day out drudgery of daily serving and dealing with the minutia, right? But rather than seeing this as some kind of barrier to your mission or a roadblock, I see it as fuel, because I have seen our organization individually and as a group, I've seen it help us stay on the forefront of, it's not just a person. It's not just a number. It's a person with a name, with an identity, with a serious condition. And to me, I mean, it might sound a little corny, but I think HIPAA adds value to the individuals we serve. I think that it helps us remember how valuable they are, because we're reminded by implementing our policies, by training on a regular basis, by discussing on a regular basis. It reminds us how important and valuable, our patients are. And I think it adds value, and it's not an impediment at all. I think it's added value to even the relationship amongst the team and the way we see our mission as important.
Yeah.
I'm biased, but I've seen that and I believe that.
That's so good, Greg. That's so good.
And I think that goes into one of the reasons why, I choose to work with this organization is, as a lawyer, we deal with big policy issues, but for most, there's lawyers that strictly deal at the macro level, but me in my previous practice, it was very individually client-centered. So I might deal with these bigger arching policies, but it's funneled into this one person's need. So all this knowledge base is about this one case, this one person, that one need, that one problem, and trying to fix and solve and advocate for that one person. And, when I started working with Hope, there was just this philosophy of, this person has a problem, and how are we going to fix that problem? And I think, if you look at broad organizations, if you talk about just, insurance premium assistance, there's hundreds of, at a national global scale, there's literally hundreds of millions of dollars just flowing for that. Talking about maybe research for cancer. Nothing, that's
not bad.
Nothing I'm saying here is negative about any of those things. I'm just talking the reality of just where financial resources go at a macroeconomic level. So we're talking about research for cancer or research for other, Alzheimer's or, premium assistance. There's all these hundreds of millions, billions of dollars literally just funneling for those things because of the value placed upon that. And, Hope kind of came along and be like, wait a minute, that person who has this horrible illness that's going through, if they lose their home and they get to the hospital, where are they going to go? If they don't have a home, is their pharmacy going to deliver their medication? Will Medicare or Medicaid approve them if they don't have a physical place of residence?
Right.
It's not just, like you said, it's not just, we really like you and want to help you. It's this gap where it's like these things are prioritized, but there was this almost this blindness to this without, if these problems exist, it's like you can have the best premium coverage, you can have the best of all this stuff. It's almost like you said, the car, like if you could have the greatest, most powerful, $500,000 car, Bentley, whatever car, you don't put any gas in it, guess what? It ain't going. I don't care how expensive the car is, how high, how fine-tuned the engine is. There's no gas in it. It's not going anywhere.
That's right.
Right? And it just seemed like there was this focus on building the car, and then these people are out of gas on the side of the road.
Right.
And an organization might be, oh man, we'll give you a car. Well, that's great. I don't have any gas. Right? And I feel like, Hope came along. Hey, we're going to fill that tank.
That's right.
Or maybe put a quarter a tank to get you to the next gas station.
That's it. That's right. That's right.
And
such a good point.
That's now the one thing where I think HIPAA kind of comes into this is, we started off there with this one singular focus of helping really unique, distinct financial needs, whether it be a mortgage payment or a rent payment or without light bill. Your refrigerator's gone, right? You can't keep your med. So we focus mainly on that. We've grown, expanded, but as the more you do as an organization, the more spheres you have. You got to be careful. Okay, your need may be here, your need may be here. And again, going back to HIPAA, that's where every time we do something new, every time we add a wrinkle, because we have a system of consent, a system of privacy, a system of privacy protection. Every time we add a new wrinkle, we're like, okay, how does that affect our system? How do we need to adjust our system? And not to repeat myself, but it kind of goes back to that culture and that system philosophy. Once you've placed it, it becomes much more natural to adjust it every time, because if you live in that culture and live in that system, every time you add a new component to your program, whatever kind of organization you are, every time you add a new wrinkle, a new disease state, or a new outlet for your resources, every time you make a change, it's, oh yeah, okay. So that's our system needs to adjust to account for that. We have a staff person that handles that now, not this. So that staff person is only going to get this information, not that information, because it's just part of your system.
Right.
And so, not to repeat myself, but I'm going to repeat myself, which is once you've got that system in place, it becomes so, going back to the fear thing, what are you afraid of? You're afraid of change. You're afraid of biting off more than you can chew. I want to encourage, for the patient out there, I want to encourage you, obviously I hope it's communicated that we value your information. if you have questions about, obviously I haven't gone, I'm not trying to go every detail here. I'm not trying
Sure,
to
of
answer
course,
every
yeah.
issue. So if you have a specific question, feel free to contact me at Hope Charities, and I will answer all your questions. But if you're an organization that's just afraid, your capacity, I promise you, your capacity is far greater than you realize.
That's a good point.
Once
So
you think that mountain is too tall to climb. I mean, I did. When y'all first came to me, it's like, man, I really want to do this, but we were committed to it. But then once you start, all of a sudden, the more it's like building your muscles. Like once you increase your capacity, and then you look back, and I mean, I'm so proud of everything we've accomplished. And I just feel like now it's like when we encounter new challenge, like we've already built that confidence, built that system. And so I just want to encourage organizations, you can do more than you think you can. Don't be afraid.
So
Start
good.
the process. You're going to grow in strength. You're going to grow in wisdom. You're going to grow in knowledge, and you're going to get better and better and better. And 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road, you're going to look back and you're not going to believe how far you've come. Because again, we're not trying to compete with anyone. We want everyone to grow. And you can, every organization that can do more than they think they can. I promise you, we've done more than we thought we could. So, and we're not that smart. We just worked really hard. That's all.
That's right. That's so good, Greg. Well, thank you so much for all that you've done, and thank you for this conversation today. I hope people have gotten a sense from behind the scenes of some of the intentionality and the deliberate work that we've put into making certain that we keep people's information healthy, but also gotten some tips maybe for organizations you might be working with, or things that you might be projects you might be working on. And you never know when you might have an opportunity to be able to jump into a committee or be a part of volunteering to help somebody out. You may be able to use some of this information to help in that way too. But and also from the individual patient, I do believe as I've learned more about this, it's helped me to be a lot smarter of a consumer and a lot more wise about how I interact with all these things in the organizations that I do. So I certainly hope that you've learned a lot today. And I really like to say that we're an open book. I mean, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, if you have ideas, if you have comments, if you have thoughts, man, call us anytime. I mean, we're here, 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. And we really do. We put a lot of time and energy into doing the work that we do. We take it very seriously, and humbled to be able to work with incredibly amazing people like you, Greg. And so so grateful that you say yes. You definitely hit the nail on the head when you said when you chose to work, because there are far more profitable things for you to give your time to than to working for us. But you have been gracious to be able to give, and far, 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 far more than we've ever been able to give to you. So I sincerely appreciate your time and your willingness to be able to share today. And thank you for all that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, we certainly hope that you get to join us next time on our next podcast, and tune in to the next go around. But if you haven't had a chance to, make sure you check our website also for our summer leadership program, which is coming up right around the corner. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one. Take care.